My name is Jinwoo Chung. I am 41 years old and I currently live in Gaithersburg, Maryland, but grew up in Rockville and Montgomery County pretty much is my home. My parents were married in Korea, came shortly after, and again, 74 and 75. And me and my two older sisters were all born here. And so I was a psych major. After I graduated, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do afterwards, but I wanted to help. I think that was always part of my DNA and the way I feel like God has built me. So I worked at a therapeutic group home for boys, 6 to 12, that was my first job outside of college. So I was a case manager and a counselor, and so I would, take these kids to their foster families, or I'd take these kids to the schools, or meet with their teachers. And so from that lens, I think it definitely gave me a perspective of the system itself, but also the potential of adopting one day. Because one, it was very real to me, and I experienced these kids cursing me out when I first started working there and pushing every possible boundary, and me being depressed for the first year that I worked there. And then realizing that I built a really strong rapport with some of these children. I remember this one time, one of the kids that I worked with, he said, Mr. Chung, and this was when he was going to bed. He goes, Mr. Chung, are you going to be here tomorrow morning? And I said, no, but so-and-so will be, but I'll be here, I think it was a Friday, I'll be here on Monday. This was after a whole day of him cursing me out and not wanting to listen. And, why would he? He's just, gone through a lot of trauma. And, but just recognizing that, him along with other children, they really gravitated towards me, not because I think I was great, but just because I was stable and I was there and I was present. And I think I showed care and effort. And on the flip side, there was definitely an affection that grew for these children, for sure, even though they weren't my own. And I think dispelling a common myth that said that, that I would hear from people that would say, how could you love a child that's not biologically connected to you? And again, these weren't my children, but I saw my affection grow in a way that I knew that would probably be possible for a child that I may potentially adopt, or for families that have done so. My wife is awesome. She's a wonderful woman. And when we were dating, we talked about a lot of things, what family, as the relationship continued, eventually we talked about family, what our family could look like, what you were open to. And, I shared with her my experience and what that led to, the experience with the group home, and what that led to in my potentially wanting to adopt as well, or in our family, regardless of whether we could have children biologically or not. And she shared the same sentiment. Well, so we got married, not extremely late, but later than we wanted to. And so we got married in our early 30s. And we thought to ourselves, we're young, we're generally young still, and so we want to still have children biologically before we made the decision to adopt, because we're not getting any younger. So we don't know how long that was going to take. What panned out was we enjoyed the first few years of our marriage without children. And I think the first 2-3 years, we're not really thinking too much about it. We get excited sometimes. We're like, oh gosh, are you pregnant? No, or it wasn't a disappointment. We're like, okay, just continue on with life. And that happened for a couple years persistently. And eventually we're like, oh man, what's happening? 2-3 years, I feel like at least we could have children by now. And so, and we recognize that there's stories of, I'm sure millions of people who couldn't conceive after the first few years. But for us, experience is quite, it contributes to the way we feel about things. So friends having children, younger families having children, and just us wondering when that's going to take place. And so we wanted to speed up that process and help in any practical ways that we could. So we wanted to go the route of fertility treatment. It wasn't IVF, it was less intrusive than that. And we never wanted to go the route of IVF, but we just wanted to see if there's any helps that we could have to maybe help us conceive. And so we did 3 rounds of IUI. The first one actually worked, we conceived, but it was an ectopic pregnancy. So I think after those first 3 tries, we actually already decided, we said, if we don't conceive and have a child within those first 3 tries, we don't want to go to IVF, because remember, we wanted to adopt. Our thought process was, we want to adopt, and it's not because we can't have children biologically. That was our plan was to have a child biologically because we wanted to do that hopefully while we were younger. And, biology matters, age matters. So, but that didn't happen. So we're like, we're just going to move on to the next step and what we wanted to do. And so we started our adoption process. We got a call from our agency on November 18th, 2020, that there was a birth mother who had switched agencies to our agency, but she wasn't quite sure who the birth father was. So racially, she didn't really know the makeup of her baby. And two, she was due in 5 days. So she was due on the 23rd of November, and we found out on the 18th. So we are like, she was like, "Are you interested?" And she had suggested maybe connecting with us because we had been waiting and been quite frustrated, even though it was within the average time of a lot of adoptions being completed. So they set up a Zoom call that day on the 18th with our daughter's birth mother, and we're like, she's white, like we weren't expecting that, and that's fine. We were open to our they ask about, I hate saying it like this, but preferences or what you're open to and comfortable with, and I think that's really wise. But we were racially, we're quite open, gender quite open, and so it didn't matter to us that we didn't know who the birth father would be or was, and so at least racially, it didn't matter to us. We went down to Southern Maryland where she was. My wife went to her doctor's appointment. I think that was on like the 20th or the 21st, and then we were just waiting. We're just going to wait. She was adamant about delivering naturally, and so we're just waiting. So we waited, and then they eventually gave her, they're like, "Baby's getting too big, it's getting too late." I don't know all the details, but we're going to induce on the 27th. And so that was the day after Thanksgiving that year. And so, we had Thanksgiving dinner. It was lockdown, right? So it was just me and my wife's immediate family. Thanksgiving, and we're outside and like apart from each other and celebrating Thanksgiving. And then we met our daughter's birth mother in Southern Maryland where the hospital was, and they didn't have to induce. She went into labor like on her way to the hospital, and so my wife was her support person. I don't know if you've seen This Is Us, but like there's like that. It was just like that. I was like waiting, not in the parking lot. I was taking a class. I was doing homework at home, and the birth mother could only have one support person, and so she chose my wife. So my wife was in the delivery room, and she saw our daughter, before anybody else, and that was really cool. Yeah, so she heard her cry and held her, and so I know that's not an experience that everyone has, and so that was really awesome. After that, she stayed in the hospital with her birth mother, with our daughter's birth mother. So she was in the hospital as she was recovering before she got discharged. She stayed there for three days, and sleeping in the same room and helping feed the baby. It was our daughter's birth mother's request that we would be discharged together and that we would part, in the parking lot. And I didn't realize it, but my wife was she was hearing our daughter's birth mother like crying in the shower, agonizing over what she thought was best for her. And then by my wife not telling me this, she holds everything inside. And so she was feeling this as well. She's like, "This is not, this is so hard, this is so sad." And as she was being discharged, we had our daughter in a carrier, and we're walking out to the parking lot, and daughter's birth mother was, fighting back tears until she couldn't, after she kissed, her daughter as well on the cheek and left, and we parted ways in the parking lot. We put our daughter in the car and we're driving, and we're looking in the rear view and we're leaving, and it was strange. I didn't expect this, but it felt wrong. Honestly, for me, I don't know if my wife as well, maybe to some degree, I can only speak for myself. We're going to get a baby, it's like, we're going to have a child is what we always wanted. So it was very selfish in that perspective, just looking at it one-sided. And then recognizing that there's a whole other story, because we didn't know we weren't expecting it, the turnaround to be so quick. We weren't expecting my wife to be in the delivery room and so I think it was a gift to have that, people can definitely learn that perspective, but to actually experience, I think, gave us a little bit more empathy for our birth mother. This should be, I think, if possible, in my perspective, every adoption, that the child has every effort to know their birth family and what they want to do as they grow older and become adults with that, with whatever they want to do with that is up to them. We want our daughter to know that, her birth mom loves her. So I'd be lying if, I'm not scared about what that's going to look like in the future. So we've met with our daughter's birth mother once, and we're trying to do it every year. But, distance is hard and finances is hard to make that happen. And so, but we do. And so we're in connection, and we're trying to think about what that's going to look like in the future when they get older. Our daughter has an older sister as well, older half sibling. And so, just recognizing that that's her family too, and so, I don't know, a lot of fears, some of it selfish for sure. I guess fear often is. And so we're definitely not unique in the sense of, I've heard many Korean couples saying that they wanted to adopt, and I believe them. I don't think that they were blowing smoke or like they just, they're just lying and trying to boost themselves about, how good they are. I don't believe that. Maybe I'm sure there's some people out there, but I generally believe that that's a true, honest desire. But the thing is, I haven't had the experience of meeting a lot of people where that's come into fruition. And maybe it's because they've experienced what we just experienced, which was a lot of pushback at the very beginning, a lot of the, how can you love a child that's not your own? Or how could you, it's going to be so hard, right? That's the comment. It's going to be so hard. Why would you add to that from a lot of Korean families? And I believe that God created all ethnicities and backgrounds, Korean people as well, with this very beautiful communal way of thinking that I think it's twofold, right? It's like a lot of it comes from Confucianism, right? And its roots, and this idea that everyone has its place and everything functions in harmony. That's my very basic general understanding of that. I maybe got that wrong, but I think that's what keeps adoption as something that's not possible or seemed as something that's shameful. Like, what does this person who's not in our bloodline fit in? But I do believe that if it were to happen, they'd be welcome, just like we found that our daughter has been. And so there was a lot of pushback. My father-in-law he's a very passionate, loving man, but he's a very passionate man. So if he believes something, he's going to say it. And he told us, this is not going to go well. Paraphrasing, he just didn't encourage it. But he, I mean, all of our parents, of my daughter's grandparents, have watched her and helped and taken care of her. But it was really cool to see my father-in-law, who was the most vocal about him not being not supportive, but he's just thinking, isn't there another way? There's other routes. There's IVF, and he mentioned to us talking about this, this interview. He said, I regret it. I regret it. She's so beautiful. It's not just physically we believe she's beautiful, but she's her personality is so beautiful, and she's so beautiful. And they actually share, our daughter's very loud and passionate, just like he is. And so there's kind of like this connection that they have. I think a lot of people sell themselves short. I don't think people's love for their biological children is because it's the part of their DNA. I think that's quite shallow. It's because they're beautiful, little children. And so I would say fight through it, have those conversations. Don't let those discouragements keep you from it. I'm not saying that you got to do it or everyone's got to do it, but don't let that be a deterrent for sure. You hear that all over the place, but a lot of those things are just not true. If you're ever to watch this, however you feel and process, your life up to this point, completely valid. You can feel the way that you want to feel, and you can process things the way you want to process. But I would also like to share that absolutely loved. Certainly, we already made mistakes, and you're only like two and a half at this point. But there'll be more. So there'll be more, and hopefully we'd have the humility to apologize as those things happen, and that we're humble in the way that you might come to us and process hurts that maybe weren't understood, and ways that we, failed as parents. Even what you might experience outside of our family in larger culture, maybe racism. Still, I'm sure that'd probably be the case. maybe the way you've been treated by other people, how difficult it might be. It's not okay. But I believe that not that you're just loved by us, but that and the rest of our family, Hami and Habi, and both sides of the family, and the Imos and Komos, and all the people at church, but that we believe that you're known and loved from the very beginning, that God sees you and knows you, and that your pain, all the pains that you might experience are not for nothing, and there's reason and purpose, and that God has not withheld anything, even his only son, Jesus, for you, and that's what we believe. And yeah, and even if that's something you don't come to believe when you get older, know that you're still loved, and that, yeah, I think that's what moved us to adopt you in the first place. My name is Jinwoo Chung, and this is my Korean American story.